to you today about social media for scientists and science organizations. And my background in this, as Danielle was saying, is primarily in science, but I have been a science communicator for basically all of my scientific career. My work with social media, while I do have some formal training, is based primarily in implementation and interest in quantitative research in general. When I started setting up the Earthscope project, social media, and developing their social media, I found it to be very unsatisfying. I was kind of flailing around. I didn't really know what I was doing or what effect it was having. And so I've really been working hard over the last 5 or 6 years to try and develop a more quantitative way of evaluating metrics so that we can make evidence-based claims about the effectiveness of communication using social media. So without further ado, I find that the best place to start is usually at the beginning. So let's start at the beginning. I gotta advance the slide. There we go. So this is a digital snapshot of the world. There are about 7.5 billion people in the world, and 3.8 billion of those people are internet users. Of those internet users, about 2.8 billion are active social media users. And the social media penetration is worldwide. It's pretty low still in Central Asia and Africa, but it's very high in the Americas, in Western and Eastern Europe and East Asia. So you really can reach people globally using this type of informal communication technique. So this can be important for science programs, in particular if you're trying to disseminate to a large audience. Now, the point I want to make with this, time spent on social media, people in the Philippines spend about 4 hours a day. People in Japan spend a little less than an hour. United States, we're here spending about 2 hours a day. And my point with this slide is that the audience you're trying to reach is already using social media. In the United States, they're already using social media about 2 hours a day, more than 2 hours a day. So this can be a really effective way, if you're a science program, to reach a lot of people. It's a high cost-benefit relation. But what if you're a scientist? Scientists are already on social media. This is from a paper that came out just a few weeks ago that talks about an analysis of scientists on Twitter. And this is a breakdown of the top disciplines that they found as described by the scientists themselves in their Twitter bios. You can see that there is a broad range of scientists that are already using Twitter, in this particular example, to communicate science. Here's geologists down here. We've got geographers, astronomers. There's physicists over here, one of the top groups. So scientists are already using this as a communication method. A Pew Research Center study of AAAS scientists found that nearly all scientists are already talking to the public, and a sizable share of those use social media and blog about their science and their research. In particular, social scientists and earth scientists are already the most publicly engaged. Here we are right here, earth scientists. About 50% of us are already using social media. And it can be very beneficial to your career. So not just public communication, but also benefiting you as a scientist. Both traditional and digital tools help scientists stay up to date. Of course, we're all reading journal articles and going to professional meetings, but many of us are following blogs by experts and following experts in our specialty on social media. And scientists in fields with more debate are very likely to say that talking to the media, and in particular using social media, can be important for their career. I'm going to pause for just a moment to talk about IRIS, who I work for. IRIS is a consortium of about 100 universities that are dedicated to the operation of science facilities for the acquisition, management, and distribution of geophysical data, primarily seismic data. Our programs contribute to scholarly research, education, earthquake hazards mitigation, verification of the Comprehensive Nuclear Test Ban Treaty, and a whole lot of other things. The graphic over here by Danielle Sumi is of the global seismographic network that we maintain with the USGS. We are very active on social media. We have 5 Facebook pages. The one we're going to talk about mainly today is our page for the general public, or our EPO page, Education and Public Outreach. We have 4 Twitter feeds. Again, the main one we'll talk about today is our IRIS EPO page, or our general page. We also have a Pinterest page, mainly used by educators. We have a YouTube channel that has more than 250 animations, webinars, lectures, all sorts of things on there. We have a large following for YouTube, and then we have a presence on LinkedIn, Instagram, and Reddit. So if you're asking now, like, what are all those things? Those are social media platforms. And this is a nice little cute diagram of vintage social networking to kind of explain what all these different platforms do and kind of how they work. So if we start at the top over here, this is Pinterest. And Pinterest is just like a bulletin board where you pin stuff you want to remember. It could be activities or lesson plans. It could be a cool map. It might be a link that you found that was really interesting. The window over here is like YouTube. It's watching the world go by. YouTube is mainly videos. Over here is your address book. That would be Facebook. That's where you keep all of your personal contacts. Opposed to that is LinkedIn. LinkedIn's like your Rolodex. LinkedIn is all of your professional contacts. And then finally over here is Instagram. And that's your pictures. That could be your family or travels or pictures of your latte, whatever you like. But this can also be useful for scientists and science programs. We go a lot of really beautiful places and people are interested in the travel and the work that we do. So if you actually have a lot of visual resources, Instagram could be a good platform. And Twitter. Twitter is like a Post-it note. It's short, it's sweet, it keeps you focused. So how do you know which platform to pick? The first thing you have to think about is your objective. What exactly are you trying to do by using social media? And you also need to think about what kind of content you're going to be posting. So with Facebook, for instance, you can post all kinds of content. With Twitter, again, you can post all kinds of content, but it has to be really short. YouTube is just videos. Instagram is just images. So if you don't have any videos, if you don't have any great images, then maybe those aren't the platforms for you to focus on. You also need to consider your audience. Different platforms have different demographics. So this is a demographic composition of different social networks. It's a little bit outdated, December 2014, but the trends still hold true. So if you're interested, say, in talking to the younger demographic, 24 and younger, I have some perhaps bad news for you, and that's that you're gonna have to learn how to use Snapchat. If you look down at the bottom here, about 45% of the market share for that particular platform are younger folks. So depending on the audience that you're trying to reach, you need to consider the demographic composition of each one of these different platforms. If you're a science organization and you don't have a social media presence yet, I recommend that you start with Facebook. So Facebook is the most ubiquitous of all of the social media platforms. It has 1.86 billion users. If Facebook was a country, it would be the largest country in the world. You probably already have a personal Facebook page, which means you already have experience. The learning curve for that is going to be much lower, which means you're going to be productive more quickly. You can share all types of content, pictures, videos, you can create your own content, you can write, blogs. So whatever you have, you can use Facebook to disseminate that information. And people are on Facebook. 62% of Americans get their news from social media, and many of them get it from Facebook. The other large market share there is Twitter. And people are on Facebook all the time. 23% of users check their accounts at least 5 times a day. Guilty as charged there, for me at least. And finally, Facebook is already extensively used by science programs. NASA, USGS, obviously IRIS, UNAVCO, SCEC, we already have Facebook pages. This is something that's kind of expected in the scientific community now. So it may be an easy sell to whoever your organizers are, that social media, Facebook in particular, is a good place for you to go. Now, if you're an individual scientist, I would recommend getting started on Twitter if you haven't already. There's a lot of benefits for scientists for being on Twitter. The first is that you can disseminate your science on Twitter. Tweets about peer-reviewed research are retweeted 19% of the time. This gives you an immense capacity to get your research known by groups that might not otherwise know about you. And this particular platform is extensively used by the media. At the SSA meeting a few weeks ago, Alexandra Weitz from Nature was talking about how she often uses Twitter to find good stories, good science stories, and how she uses it to find people to interview about stories. Additionally, it helps you to build a network of other scientists. The median Twitter following is 730 times larger than the median university department size. We all know that working with colleagues and collaborating and brainstorming really is what gets you to really good scientific ideas, helps you to work through problems. If you're in a small university or a small working group, it can be kind of devastating, can be hard to kind of get the ball rolling. And Twitter can give you the capacity to talk to lots of other scientists. Additionally, 55% of academic Twitter users received their PhD less than 5 years ago. So early career scientists are really utilizing this particular platform. It's a good way to plug in to the early career networks. If you're a more established scientist, this is a good way to mentor younger scientists. If you're an early career scientist, this is a really good way to build up your network of peers. Additionally, you can educate the public. So just a moment ago, I was talking about the median Twitter following, but of course, that's not just going to be scientists. It's going to be made up of scientists and others. And Darling et al. 2013, in a survey of 116 marine scientists, found that 55% of their followers were scientists or science organizations, 45% were the public, media, and non-scientists. So you really have the opportunity to show the public how science works, to discuss scientific information, and to present them with the scientific perspective on things. The other thing you can do with Twitter is help to influence policy. So Twitter is extensively used by policymakers. All members of Congress have a Twitter account, and staffers are usually looking on Twitter to find people that are influential in the field so that they can follow that research and so that they can make contacts. Okay, so hopefully I've convinced you why, as a science organization or as a scientist, you might need to start a social media program. Let's talk about the theoretical framework for how to do it in the right way. This is an easy graphic that talks about how to increase impact, not just for social media, but for any program or any evaluation that you're looking to do. And this is by Davis and Scalise, 2015. So you start with a needs assessment. What do you need to do? Then you set clear goals and objectives. You design a program based on best practices. You implement that program, you measure your outcomes, and you see how well they met your needs. In terms of social media itself, this is something that I found very useful just in terms of how to think about it. And this is from social learning theory. I modified this from Peters et al. 2013, and it's based on the stimulus organism response model. In this case, the stimulus is your input, anything that you're putting into your social media. The organism part is the colored balls there, and thinking of social media as an organism is kind of a good analogy because it's always changing, different parts are interacting, and then that's what's going to produce your metrics. And you evaluate those metrics to change your input. Of course, your input is going to be based on your goals and objectives, and then how you design things is going to be based on best practices. So just to talk a little bit about the organism of social media, if you will, people are on social media for a particular reason. They have a motivation, and studies have shown that their motivation is one of three things. They're either getting social value, intellectual value, or cultural value by being on social media. And depending on what kind of information you're presenting, a lot of what we're going to be doing as science programs is giving them something that has intellectual value. And their motivation is going to help to guide our content and what we're producing, what we're putting in. Content has three basic characteristics: the quality. Obviously, we all do good science. We're going to be putting out quality content. The volume of content, you can have too much or too little, and you would determine that by looking at your metrics. And then valence. Valence is something we intuitively understand, but probably haven't talked about officially a lot. So valence is just the emotion or the tone of a post. So posts that go viral tend to have a high valence. They evoke some kind of strong emotion, whether it's excitement or wonder or surprise or anger. So if we can find posts that have a high valence, we have a greater chance of reaching a broader number of people. The blue ball here is the social part of social media. This is the interactive part, the part that really makes it different from, say, a web page. This is where people within your network can actually work together. They're going to be networking with each other. They're going to be sharing your content with their friends and their network. They're going to be expressing their opinions on the things that you've posted through retweets or replies or likes or comments. And then finally, every organism has a structure, and your network structure is important. The size of your network, the connections between the individual people or nodes in your network, how segmented or distributed they are. All of these things play into the type of stuff you're going to be putting into your social media organism and how it's going to be reacting. And the reaction that you get is your metrics. Those are your measurable metrics. And you take that metric information, look at how well it's helping you meet your goals and objectives, and then you change your input. Okay, so that's all well and good, right? How do you practically move forward with that? And that's what I'm going to spend a little time on now, go through the basics, and then we'll go through some examples from what I do with Iris. So the first thing you need to do is figure out what your objectives are, determine your audience, figure out what content you're going to use, determine a posting strategy, figure out how you're going to engage with your audience, and then do your evaluation. So to break that down a little more, your objective. What exactly are you trying to accomplish by using social media? What's your motivation for doing this particular thing? And how is this going to meet your larger goals as an organization or as an individual? So for IRIS, our objectives are to offer high quality science content, provide content and products for educators. We want to drive traffic to our website, improve brand recognition, etc. Audience. Who is your intended audience? How old are they? Is it older adults? Is it graduate students? Is it elementary school students? What's their knowledge base? Do they know a lot about science? Do they not know a lot about science? Do you have any special target groups? For us, with the IRIS EPO Facebook page, we're interested in just the general public of all ages that have, we assume, some science background. And we're really also very interested in educators. We want to provide educators with the tools that they can use in the classroom. Next is content. What exactly are you going to post? Are you going to make it yourself, or are you going to share posts that other people have created? And if you're going to share posts, what sources do you trust? Whose voices do you choose to amplify? And what media are you going to use? Are you going to do pictures? Are you going to do videos? Are you going to mainly do narratives? So for us, we do seismology and earthquakes in the news. We always try and share new products from IRIS and from our partners. And of course, we really want to amplify the voices of our partners and other people that are trying to do similar science communication work. We have education news, teachable moments, ground motion visualizations, and those types of things. Next is your posting strategy. So how often are you going to post these things? You can post too much and you can post too little. When are you going to post them? What time of day? There are some times when your user community is going to be online, and those are the times where you want to put out your most high profile information, because that's going to be seen by the most people. What are your community growth strategies? So for us, I found through trial and error and through looking at metrics that posting on Facebook 2 to 3 times a day is ideal for our IRIS community, and I post during peak times. For us, that happens to be around 12 Eastern, 9 Pacific, and I think that's probably because it's lunch on the East Coast. Everybody's just getting to work and having coffee on the West Coast, but that's going to vary depending on your user community. We also vary the content type. I post at least 2 videos a week, and that's because the Facebook algorithm keeps videos up on people's news feeds for longer, so there's a greater chance of them seeing it and interacting with it. And to increase interaction, I do something weekly called a teacher's toolbox, where I put out lesson plans or videos that might be useful for teachers in the classroom. So that's one of my community growth strategies. Engagement. This is the social part of social media. How are you going to engage with your community? For me, I make sure to follow partner organizations. I like scientifically accurate, relevant postings. I make sure to repost excellent content from all across the web, but particularly from our partner organizations. I comment, and very, very important, you have to always reply to comments or questions that people have on your social media accounts. Evaluation, evaluation, evaluation. I should have put a lot of exclamation points after this. This is critically important. Online metrics are available for free in almost every social media platform. You really can use these to drill down into the statistics. You can find out who's engaging, when they're engaging, what your most successful post types are. And I could give a whole nother webinar on different types of metrics and how to use those metrics and how to evaluate those metrics. Statistics are fun. Just as a basic breakdown, I make sure to evaluate post reach and engagement every week. I come in on Monday morning and I have my coffee, and that's what I do for about an hour. I determine engagement rate for post types and topics. I track posting times and evaluate correlations. I track the ratio of likes and unlikes, track growth bursts, and find causal factors. For instance, once we had this spike of people that started following us, and I couldn't figure out why. We hadn't had any posts go viral. There hadn't been a big earthquake. And I finally figured out by looking at a few different things that were happening that it was because we'd had a distinguished lecture series, and all of the people that had liked the Facebook page were from Colgate, and that was where we had our distinguished lecture. So for the next few days, I made sure to post things that were regionally relevant to that particular university. And of course, you can't get everything you need from the online metrics. You can really get a much deeper sense of your particular community, and you can ask the questions that are really interesting to you by doing a survey of users. And we do that yearly. So, okay, this is where the rubber meets the road, right? I've told you what you need to do, and I know that it looks a little bit overwhelming. So this is where I try and prove to you that it's worth doing. I came to Iris on December the 1st, 2015, and that's when I implemented the social media strategy. These statistics here are from Facebook. The image on the top in blue are the number of likes on the EPO Facebook page, and on the bottom is the reach, or the number of people that we're reaching weekly with our posts. This is when we implemented the strategy. You can see it was kind of a slow growth in the likes. It took about 6 months for it to really take off, and that was me evaluating and adjusting the strategy by looking at the metrics. But something really interesting to note is that down here, our reach really has increased quite a bit, and it continues to grow and be sustained. So what this equates to is a 213% increase in followers and about a 3,200% increase in weekly reach over the last 16 months. So doing a similar analysis on Twitter, and have you noticed that this is a 2-axis graph? We have total followers, mentions, tweets, and new followers on the left, and impressions on the right. This purple line here, the iris purple, is the total number of followers. The green line is the number of impressions. The navy blue line are new followers, and then the orange and teal lines are tweets and mentions. This is where I implemented the social media strategy, and since then we've had about a 260% increase in followers, about a 1,400% increase in monthly impressions. And if you take just the Iris EPO Facebook page and the Iris EPO Twitter page over the last 16 months, that accounts for about 11 million Facebook and Twitter impressions. So in terms of cost benefit, it really is a great tool to use to get your message out there and to get your science out there. Also, you might remember that one of my objectives was to drive traffic to our website. Of course, most of our information is on our website. Social media is a way to highlight things and to get people to go there. So these are metrics that come from Google Analytics. On the left is Facebook, on the right is Twitter. So on the top, the time frame is January to December 2016. On the bottom is January to December 2015. These are the numbers we're interested in. Those are the number of people that were driven to our website from social media. For Facebook, that's increased 140% over that year. And on Twitter, it's increased 622%. So we really are meeting that objective of driving more traffic to our website through our social media accounts. All right, so I've convinced you, right? Everybody's super convinced that they want to go start a social media strategy. Let me just review where to start. Okay, pick your platform, create your strategy, set up your platforms, create your content, disseminate that content, and then evaluate your metrics. Then you rinse and repeat. Now to the frequently asked questions. I know that everybody has questions about this. The one I get the most often is, how much time does it take? So for individuals, you need to allow probably 1 to 2 hours up front, and that's if you're setting up one platform, say Twitter. And after you've set it up, set up your profile, pulled your picture, done some exploring to figure out how everything works, made sure that you're following people, start interacting and tweeting or whatever you're doing, posting, depending on your platform. Then you just maintain over coffee breaks and news breaks. And once you kind of get into the swing of it, it really becomes kind of second nature. I don't know where people go to get their news, because I go to get all my news from Twitter. So I'm already on there and I'm already communicating and interacting just because I want to find out what's happened that day. It's also important maybe once or twice a month to spend a little extra time looking for new contacts and thinking about your messaging strategy. Now for organizations, it's going to take some more time. You're going to want to allow 3 to 4 hours to create your strategy. You want to be really careful about this, because your strategy is going to be guiding your entire social media effort. And you're going to have a slightly different strategy for every platform that you create, because they're going to have different audiences. They're going to have slightly different objectives. So make sure that you allow the time to do that. And then set aside about a day per platform to set everything up, to make sure that you are introduced well to the platform, to explore the platform, to really kind of figure everything out, to make sure that you're growing a community. Go to other pages, like those pages, make sure that you have people that you're following that are relevant to your interests. And then expect to spend 20 to 30 minutes a day per platform. So that's creating the content, posting the content, answering people's questions and comments, going and liking other people's stuff, being social on social media. Once a week, set aside about an hour for analytics. Go through, see what's working, see what's not working, make notes. And then quarterly, you're going to want to set aside 2 to 3 hours to summarize your analytics and revise your strategy. I know this seems like a lot of time, but these quarterly reports are really useful for making evidence-based claims, which can be great, particularly for NSF, because you can prove the efficacy of your communication efforts by documenting things in this way. Another question that I get a lot is, how do you balance the personal versus the professional things? So I think most people probably already have a Facebook page. 1.86 billion of us do. So most people, unless you're like, you know, Bill Nye or Lucy Jones, you don't have a professional Facebook page and a personal Facebook page. But most people have like one Twitter account, you know? And there was actually a paper that came out in 2015 by Bohon that was really good, that talks about the differences in personal and professional tweets of scholars. And most of the people in their survey had one Twitter account that they used for both personal and professional use. So I really do think that's the way to go, because I think that we as scientists really need to show ourselves to be human. We need to humanize science. So make sure that you're yourself, you know, share your thoughts, share your interest, as well as your science. Make sure you don't say anything online that you wouldn't say at the company Christmas party. That seems to be a pretty good line to draw in terms of, you know, balancing what's appropriate. But it really is important that people can see you as a person. There was a study that came out, I don't remember the reference right off the top of my head, but it showed that people trust their friends more than news media, more than the public school system, more than just about any other organization you can think of. People trust their friends. If you can befriend people on social media, they're going to trust you, and then they're going to trust science. If you need some examples of people that are doing this really, really well, Julian Losos is doing it really well. Lucille Bruhat is doing it really well. Austin Elliott. They're really melding together their personal and professional accounts in such a way that it makes them very accessible to people. They talk about earthquakes, they talk about their science, but they also talk about their cats. They talk about the weather. They talk about architecture. It makes them very interesting and three-dimensional. So in conclusion, effective social media can be used by scientists and science programs to reach large numbers of people, including the general public, but also it can be used to reach other scientists. A social media strategy and a quantitative metric evaluation can improve online communication efficacy. And to quote Eric Qualman, we don't have a choice on whether we do social media. The question is how well we do it. So please follow us on any of these different social media channels. If you have any questions or want to talk further about any of these things, please email me. My email is there in the corner. Another comment that I'd like to make is that we are not in competition with each other. Scientists, science organizations, this isn't like a funding thing, right? We want to get good science out into the world. We want to amplify the voices of the people that are doing great science. We want to work interactively with the public. We want to make sure that we're building trust and that we're establishing networks and relationships between scientists, between the public, with each other. We want to make sure that good communication is happening. So any way that we can leverage each other's efforts is fantastic. So I'm happy to help anybody, you know, if I can with anything that you're working on. You know, I'm happy to share the IRIS social media strategy and to talk about your strategies and objectives with you. So, you know, just let me know. So thank you for your attention. And that took a lot longer when I practiced it. I guess I was talking fast. So if anybody has any questions, I can take those now, and thank you.
Well, thank you, Wendy. And somebody even wrote in, Leslie Gordon wrote in, thank you as well.
Hi, Leslie.
And so while I guess people are thinking about their questions and writing them in, what would you say are some common pitfalls? Like, what do you see that some people do with science communication that maybe they could change what they're doing right now? Does that make sense?
It does. I think the biggest thing is that people don't use it to communicate. I mean, that sounds crazy to me, but I talk to a lot of people who say, yeah, I set up a Twitter account because I felt like I should, but I've never actually used it. Or I don't comment because, I'm worried about putting something out there. What if I say something wrong? And I totally get that because once it's on the internet, it's there. But there's kind of a different standard with social media in that people recognize that it's happening in real time, it's happening quickly, it's not a peer-reviewed publication. You can misspell things and sometimes you'll say something that's incorrect and then you just go back and correct yourself. Something to remember is that the longevity of most tweets is like 12 to 24 hours, and then they're kind of like gone. I mean, they're always retrievable. We've seen examples of that recently, but they're not really in people's consciousness anymore. They're not streaming across the news feed. For Facebook, it can be a little bit longer, 24, 48, maybe even 72 hours. But once you put something out there, it's not like it's going to haunt you for the rest of your life. Get active, start talking to people. It's supposed to be a social network, and it can be good, particularly for introverts who don't like public speaking, but have really great, important things to say, because you can do it on your own terms. You're interacting with people, you're getting your science out there, you're being a voice and a force for science, but you're doing it on your own terms, in your own way, and in your own time. So that's a good thing.
That's great.
Did that answer your question?
Yeah, it does. It does. I have a Twitter account that I don't really use myself, so that's good. And just a reminder to enter your questions in the question box. You won't be like unmuting people who have their hands raised. So just FYI, please type your questions in the question box. Mike Lynch wrote, how much overlap would you recommend between your different social media platforms?
That's a really good question, Mike. It depends. I would say if you wanted to, if you're short on time, you can post everything you post on Facebook to Twitter, but not vice versa. I have found, and I think the research suggests that you want to post less on Facebook than you do on Twitter. For me, I post, 2 to 3 times on Facebook every day, and on Twitter, I go for 8 to 10 times a day. So, the things I post on Twitter, the range of content is much broader. I'll retweet people more often. The pace is much faster. Facebook, I put more time into content development. So it's kind of a one-way street that way. You can double dip in one direction, but not in the other. Okay. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think so. The double dipping sounds, yeah.
And a lot of people ask a question about using moderated content, like Hootsuite and those sorts of things. And those can be really, really useful depending on your field. So for me, obviously, I work for IRIS. We do things with earthquakes and sometimes volcanic eruptions and tsunamis, anything that can be detected by geophysical instrumentation. And so that's developing in real time. So with IRIS, I tend to not preset a lot of content to go out, via these automatic content distribution systems. But I think if you're doing something that's more, ecology based, things where you don't have a real time component that's quite as strong, that can be a really effective way to get out content in a very measured way so that you're not overwhelming people's news feeds, but you're kind of constantly staying on their radar and feeding them a good dose of science.
Okay, that's great. Leopold Linkamer from the University of Costa Rica has a question. He said that they have a Facebook page for the National Seismological Network with 250,000 likes. When large earthquakes or eruptions happen, they get a lot of questions and are not able to answer them all. And he's asking, in your experience answering questions, how do you deal with like an avalanche of questions when things come in?
That's another really good question. And that has to do with delegation, I have found. So when those things have happened to us, what I do, I have several people that I know that are good communicators, and I'll just take questions and, cut and paste the questions and send them to people in the office, and then have them answer the questions and then just cut and paste it back in. Because you're absolutely right. When there's a big event and you have things happening really fast, it's impossible to keep up. The other thing that I have done, a lot of the questions tend to be very similar or overlap. And so I'll use that as kind of a teachable moment on Facebook and Twitter and take some of those questions, the ones that are kind of broad category, and answer them publicly, so that I'm not necessarily responding to each one of those questions, but will say, we've received a lot of questions like this. If I don't respond to you personally, I'm really sorry, but here's the answer to that general question. That way you're kind of making it a teachable moment for your entire community.
Got it. Okay, that's good. Good to know. Monica Gowan asks, well, she says, thanks, Wendy, for the nice overview. What's your recommendation for the best way to reply to a Twitter post? Like, what are the netiquette basics?
Yeah, that's hard. So, it sounds like she knows, Monica, like a lot about Twitter already. So for those of you who don't, if you're replying to someone, you have @ and then their username. If you want everyone to be able to see your reply, you put a period in front of the @ and that way it doesn't just go to that one person. Whenever I try and do anything, I try and, you try and answer the question and provide additional resources if you can. Always put a positive spin on it. Sometimes you get people that are presenting an alternative viewpoint, which can be problematic, but try and put a positive spin on it. Send them to peer-reviewed research if you can. But yeah, the netiquette on Twitter, best practices on Twitter is like a whole different webinar, but that's a good question. Try and be positive, try and answer the question, try and send them to additional information.
Great. Jenny Mari, sorry if I'm butchering that, asks if you could advise on the best method for learning how to use Twitter. Because, I obviously have an account myself that I don't use. So, yeah, what's the best way to learn how to use it?
Just to start playing around. Like I said, go online, set yourself up. If you're looking for people to follow, just send me an email and I'll follow you, and I can give you recommendations of people to follow. And then just kind of join into conversations. Retweet things people are saying and reply to things that people have said. Just like everything, you learn best by doing. If you're interested in making sure that you don't break any of the netiquette rules, there's a lot of resources available online about best practices for Twitter and things to do and not do. And if anybody's interested, I'm happy to put together something about that as well, because I have slides here and there about netiquette and best practices. But, just get on and start doing it. And remember that the things that you put on there, aren't forever. And if you feel really silly about something you've said, you can always delete it.
Great. Jason Ballman from Skek asks, sometimes we like to post links to papers, but there can be issues with individual access to certain publications. Or you may want to keep people on the social platform and not bounce them off to a particular science journal site. Do you think it's okay to bypass that by uploading the paper to your tweet or Facebook post as images? Converting it to a simple PDF or a PNG. But what issues have you seen with that? Or is that a good or convenient idea?
Oh, Jason, this is a really hard question. So there's a lot of, there's of course always the paywall issue when you're trying to get to peer-reviewed journals. And even on things like ResearchGate and places where people will put their PDFs that are kind of murky, you can share that if you like, but there are some copyright issues that can be involved. So it's always good to be mindful of that, particularly if the author has already posted a picture on Twitter from their publication. I think it's great to share that to gauge interest. And if you can find something, a lot of people, particularly recently, a lot of scientists, when they put out a big paper, they'll also write a blog post about it. So you can refer people to their blog if they've talked about it there. And obviously that's not always going to be the case. As for bouncing people, off of your social platform to another place, it all depends on your objectives, right? So if your objective is to keep them on your site and to have them learning about your information, then maybe refer them to something that you've created that's similar to their question or to what they're asking about. For me, my larger purpose is just to disseminate good scientific information and to educate the public and build relationships. So for me, sending them off to another scientist's website or to another organization's website is meeting my broader objective. So I don't have so much an issue with that. But you can find ways around that to divert to resources that you already have.
That's great. Debbie Weiser asks, first off, she says, thanks, Wendy. That was a great webinar. Do you ever feel the need to correct harmful false statements made by commenters? And she says, as an example, if a comment about like the triangle of life had the most likes on a post and was therefore highly visible, would you post about and correct like the earthquake safety actions?
Absolutely. That's something that comes up a lot. I've had discussions about that actually with Mark Benthian from SCEC a long time ago. And there's two different approaches you can take, right? So one way of looking at it is, say you post something about the 7 steps to earthquake safety or something, and somebody says, oh no, triangle of life in the comment, which for those of you who aren't earthquake people, you're supposed to drop, cover, and hold on during earthquakes. The triangle of life is a different way of thinking about it that has been shown to be incorrect. And so by having it, the idea is by having it on your page, you're giving it some validity, but I don't think of it that way. It's a conversation. I think of it as a teachable moment. So I've had people put the triangle of life thing down, and I pretty forcefully say, absolutely not. This is what you should do. This is why you should do it. And here's a whole bunch of resources as to why the triangle of life is not the thing to do. And here are all these organizations that support duck cover and hold on. Here's the evidence for duck cover and hold on. You sort of, bury them with evidence. And that tends to show the people that are following the conversation, kind of the lurkers, that your way is more evidence-based and this other way is not so much. And those are the times when, as a community, as a social media community, we can really speak up with other organizations. If you're looking at your partner organization's posts, that would be a time that maybe SCEC would step in and say, absolutely not the triangle of life. Absolutely, you should do duck cover and hold on. And here's resources that we have. And so that way you're really amplifying the right message. But that is a problem. And recently on our IRIS page, we've had some people posting links that take you off site to non-peer-reviewed sites with questionable information. And so a lot of times, if people keep posting that sort of information, I'll just delete it, because there's no point in, I don't have the time to argue that every single post. So after I've discussed something with some particular poster 2 times, then they're out. That's kind of my rule.
Great. Cleo Pullen asks about any good ideas on how to get comfortable on Snapchat.
Oh, Lord, Snapchat. First off, I am not the demographic for Snapchat. Right. So I'm working on that too. And I would actually be super interested in forming a working group with people to come up with kind of a best practices for science organizations when using Snapchat. I have it. I'm working with Jason Ballman and Beth Bartel from SCEC and UNAVCO to try and implement it, but I'm happy to work with other people because that is not my forte. So I do not have any advice. And if you have some, I would be happy to listen.
Great. Thanks, Wendy. Zoe Yin asks, she says that she's managing the social media presence at her earthquake science nonprofit, and part of the challenge is to create a robust presence under extremely limited time constraints. Do you have any suggestions for making the most of limited time, or perhaps utilizing multi-platform posting services?
Yes, if you have very limited time, then definitely utilize the multi-platform postings like Hootsuite and other things. Try and carve out a block of time. It's hard with earthquakes though, right? Because you've got to kind of be responsive for when things are happening so that you can be putting out up-to-date information for your community. But carve out a block of time where you can do most of your content creation and kind of get in the zone. Schedule that to all go out. And then if you can evaluate your metrics, that's important to seeing what works and what doesn't work. And I would say, also make sure that you have developed a strong peer network, that you have places that you can share information from. So, if there's a big earthquake, who do you want to amplify? Do you want to amplify IRIS? Do you want to amplify the USGS? Usually, the go-to, in my opinion, for, like a recent earthquake in the United States really should be the USGS. If it's a recent earthquake in New Zealand, it should be GeoNet. Making sure that you have those kind of ready and accessible, so that you can, after a big earthquake, just go to that place and share that content so that your users are getting up-to-date information from your platforms. I think that's a good way, to kind of take the burden, some of the time burden off. Does that answer the question? I feel like that wasn't a very good answer.
Oh, I
I
think
can't
that's
see your
a good answer.
response.
Yeah, because I mean, I think, yeah, you should definitely carve out some time, and then you just shouldn't like blatantly use the multi-posting tools. But in the absence of having some time to do that, because I remember Wendy, you told me before about like if you just use Facebook or Twitter, I forget which direction it goes, but when you use Facebook and then it automatically posts to Twitter, it's not nearly as effective as if you had just posted the same thing in Twitter. Is that correct?
Yeah, so you can share your Facebook post on Twitter, but you don't want to share every Twitter post on Facebook.
Got it. Great.
And Facebook is where you're going to be crafting those longer messages.
Okay.
And so taking the time to do several of them at once and really like leveraging other efforts that you're doing. So if somebody in your group's writing a blog, making sure you always post that blog. If you do a science highlights thing, making sure you always post the science highlights and post them more than once. Post a blog posting like twice in 1 month, just to make sure that people are actually reading it. It's okay to duplicate content as long as you don't do it with everything and as long as you don't do it like back to back.
Great. And then our last question is from Stacy Edwards. She says, very useful presentation. Can you recommend any other good sources of information or resources for using social media as a science communication tool?
Yes, there are a lot of papers that have come out probably in the last 2 years, um, both about effective science communication on social media, about just kind of effective social media in general, and that most of that comes from the PR and marketing literature. And then there are some really, really good papers. I've kind of been delving into this recently on just effective science communication, why scientists engage, how they engage, and then you can bring those things together to really, craft a message and figure out what's going to work for you. So Stacy, if you're interested, just send me an email and I can hook you up with a whole bunch of really, really interesting scientific literature, like peer-reviewed literature about that. And then I also have some groups that I follow that are just, kind of the social media how-to people. They offer short training sessions that have been useful just for tips and tricks and kind of best practices, because that's always evolving, right? So you kind of have to keep up to date as things are changing. So just, send me an email and we can exchange information.
Great. And just Wendy's email's in the bottom corner. It's bohon@irs.edu. And so feel free to reach her there. And with that, that concludes our webinar. Thank you all for attending, and thank you so much, Wendy, for giving a wonderful presentation.
Thank you for having me, Danielle, and thank you everybody for attending.
Thanks.
Go forth and do science.
That's right. All right. Take care, everyone. Have a good rest of Wednesday.
You too. Bye, everybody.
Bye.